Before we begin, take a moment to support the channel. Subscribe and like the video. It really helps us share real history and bring important stories like this to more people. The Warsaw Ghetto and the Uprising. Systematic destruction, human endurance, and the meaning of resistance. The story of the Warsaw Ghetto is one of the most devastating and revealing narratives of the Holocaust. It was a space deliberately engineered to transform human beings into expendable bodies, to erase identity through hunger, isolation, and terror, and to prepare an entire population for annihilation. Yet the history of the ghetto cannot be reduced solely to suffering and death. Within its walls unfolded a complex human drama of moral dilemmas, social breakdown, solidarity, cultural survival, and ultimately armed resistance. The ghetto became both a laboratory of destruction and a crucible in which the meaning of dignity, choice, and defiance was redefined. Before the Second World War, Warsaw stood at the heart of Jewish life in Eastern Europe. Its Jewish community was among the largest and most influential in the world. Jews had lived in Warsaw for centuries, shaping its economic, intellectual, and cultural life. By the late 1930s, Jewish Warsaw was a city within a city. It possessed its own schools, hospitals, libraries, theaters, newspapers, political parties, and charitable institutions. The streets echoed with Polish and Yiddish alike. Debates about religion, socialism, Zionism, assimilation, and tradition animated cafes and meeting halls. Life was not free of anti-Semitism, but it was alive, dynamic, and forward-looking. The German invasion of Poland in September 1939 brought an abrupt end to this world. Warsaw was heavily bombed and besieged before capitulating. From the first days of occupation, Jews were singled out as a target population. Violence against them was both spontaneous and systematic. Jewish men were dragged into forced labor, beaten in the streets, and publicly humiliated. Synagogues were desecrated. Jewish property was confiscated. Legal discrimination followed physical abuse as Jews were excluded from professions, public spaces, and transportation. These early measures served a broader ideological purpose. The occupiers aimed to strip Jews of their social identity and legal personhood. By marking Jews with armbands and isolating them economically, the authorities prepared the population, both Jewish and non-Jewish, for further escalation. Hunger was introduced as a weapon. Jewish food rations were set at levels incompatible with life. Disease spread rapidly, reinforced by overcrowding and collapsing sanitation. Death began to stalk the streets long before mass murder was officially implemented. In October 1940, the German authorities ordered the creation of a sealed Jewish district in Warsaw. The decision was presented as an administrative necessity, but its true function was genocidal. The ghetto was officially sealed on November 16, 1940. A wall over 3 meters high encircled the area, topped with barbed wire and broken glass. Armed guards enforced strict controls. Escape was punishable by death, a sentence often carried out publicly as a warning. More than 400,000 Jews were forced into an area of just over 3 square kilometers. The density was catastrophic. Families were crammed into apartments meant for a fraction of their number. Entire households shared single rooms. Privacy disappeared. Traditional family structures eroded under pressure. The home, once a refuge, became a site of constant stress and despair. Hunger quickly became the central experience of ghetto life. Official rations for Jews sometimes provided fewer than 300 calories per day. Starvation was not a failure of logistics. It was a deliberate policy. People sold everything they owned, furniture, clothing, heirlooms, religious objects, to obtain food. The black market became the primary means of survival. Smuggling was widespread and essential. Children, small and agile, risked their lives daily to bring food into the ghetto. Many were shot by guards. Their deaths rarely registered beyond their families. Malnutrition destroyed bodies and minds. Immune systems collapsed, allowing diseases such as typhus, tuberculosis, and dysentery to spread unchecked. Hospitals lacked medicine, equipment, and even basic supplies. Doctors were forced to choose whom to treat and whom to let die. Corpses lay in the streets, collected by carts each morning. Death became normalized, stripped of ceremony or meaning. Grief had no time to unfold when survival demanded constant focus. The ghetto environment produced extreme moral pressure. Under conditions of scarcity and terror, traditional ethical frameworks were strained to their limits. Some individuals collaborated with the occupiers, hoping to gain protection or resources. Others exploited desperation through profiteering. The Jewish Council, or Judenrat, was compelled to administer the ghetto under German orders. Its members faced impossible choices: obey commands and become instruments of oppression, or resist and risk immediate execution. Their actions, judged later from the safety of hindsight, remained deeply controversial. Yet alongside moral collapse existed extraordinary acts of solidarity. Mutual aid organizations distributed food to the poorest. Soup kitchens fed tens of thousands daily with almost nothing. Underground schools continued to educate children despite the ban on formal education. Orphanages struggled heroically to care for children whose parents had died or disappeared. Teachers taught without books, doctors treated without medicine, and social workers labored without rest. Cultural and intellectual life persisted as a form of resistance. Writers, poets, and artists chronicled ghetto life in diaries, poems, drawings, and songs. Music was performed in secret concerts. Theater groups staged performances in basements. Religious observance continued despite prohibitions. These activities were not escapism. They were assertions of humanity in a system designed to deny it. One of the most significant acts of resistance was documentation. A clandestine network of historians and journalists collected testimonies, statistics, official decrees, and personal reflections. They understood that they might not survive, but they were determined that the truth would. The act of recording reality was an act of defiance against a regime built on lies and erasure. Children endured some of the most severe suffering. Many lost their parents and became orphans overnight. Childhood ended abruptly. Hunger aged them prematurely. Yet children also embodied resilience. They formed friendships, shared food, played games in ruins, and demonstrated courage far beyond their years. Their presence was a constant reminder of the futures being systematically destroyed. In the summer of 1942, the nature of the ghetto changed irrevocably. German authorities began mass deportations under the pretense of resettlement to the east. Between July and September, approximately 300,000 Jews were deported from the ghetto to Treblinka, where most were murdered shortly after arrival. Families were torn apart at the Umschlagplatz. Panic and terror dominated daily life. At first, many believed deportation meant forced labor. Gradually, the truth became undeniable. Deportation meant death. This realization shattered remaining illusions. Fear transformed into understanding, and understanding into resolve. Those who remained in the ghetto, mostly young people, underground activists, and those in hiding, understood that survival through compliance was no longer possible. Armed resistance began to take shape. Underground organizations coordinated their efforts despite ideological differences. Weapons were desperately scarce. A handful of pistols, homemade grenades, Molotov cocktails. Training was minimal. No one believed victory was possible. Resistance was not about saving lives in a conventional sense. It was about choosing the manner of death and asserting human agency. On April 19, 1943, as German forces entered the ghetto to carry out its final liquidation, they were met with gunfire. The Warsaw Ghetto Uprising had begun. For the first time, German troops were forced to retreat from a Jewish district under armed attack. The symbolic impact was enormous. For nearly a month, poorly armed fighters held out against a vastly superior military force. They fought from bunkers, rooftops, and ruins. The occupiers responded with overwhelming brutality, systematically burning the ghetto building by building. Smoke filled the air. Civilians hiding underground suffocated or burned alive. Fighters, facing capture and torture, often chose suicide. On May 16, 1943, the occupiers declared the ghetto destroyed. The Great Synagogue of Warsaw was blown up as a symbol of victory. What had once been a living neighborhood was reduced to rubble. Most remaining inhabitants were killed or deported. The uprising did not halt the genocide, but it transformed historical memory. It shattered the myth of Jewish passivity and demonstrated that resistance existed even in the most hopeless conditions. It forced a redefinition of heroism, not as victory, but as moral choice in the face of certain death. The legacy of the Warsaw Ghetto endures as a warning and a lesson. It reveals how modern bureaucratic systems can be mobilized for mass murder, and how ordinary people can become complicit through obedience and indifference. At the same time, it affirms the capacity of human beings to resist dehumanization, to preserve dignity, and to assert meaning even when all hope seems lost. To remember the Warsaw Ghetto is not only to mourn the dead, but to confront the choices that shaped their fate. It is to acknowledge both the depths of cruelty and the heights of courage. It is a reminder that resistance does not always change outcomes, but it can change history.